Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speak English Daily. I'm Anna.
And I'm Mike. Today we're going to talk about something fascinating, the secret of charismatic people.
That's a great topic. I think everyone has met someone who seems naturally charismatic. You know, the kind of person who walks into a room and somehow everyone notices them.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that charisma isn't always about being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes the most charismatic people are actually quite calm and quiet.
That's true. When I hear the word charisma, I imagine someone who attracts people's attention in a natural way. They make others feel comfortable, interested, and sometimes even inspired.
Yes, and charismatic people often have a kind of presence. It's difficult to explain, but when they are speaking, people want to listen.
I agree. And presence doesn't always mean being dramatic or entertaining. Sometimes it's simply the way someone speaks, listens, or reacts to others.
Right. Think about a teacher, a leader, or even a friend who makes conversations feel meaningful. You leave the conversation thinking, wow, that person is really interesting.
That's a great point. Charisma often comes from the way someone makes other people feel. If someone makes you feel heard, respected, and valued, you naturally enjoy being around them.
Exactly. In fact, many people believe charisma is some kind of mysterious talent that you are born with, but psychologists and communication experts often say something different.
Yes, many experts say charisma is actually a collection of behaviors and habits. In other words, it's something people can learn and develop.
That's encouraging because it means charisma isn't limited to celebrities, politicians, or famous speakers. Ordinary people can also become more charismatic.
And I think that's important for our listeners to understand. Charisma isn't about changing your personality completely. It's more about improving the way you communicate with others.
Exactly. For example, charismatic people usually show genuine interest in others. They ask questions, they listen carefully, and they respond thoughtfully.
And they also tend to speak clearly and confidently, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that makes people trust what they are saying.
That's a key difference. Confidence attracts people, but arrogance pushes people away.
Yes, and charismatic people seem to understand that balance very well. They appear confident, but they are also warm and approachable.
Another interesting thing is that charisma doesn't always depend on appearance. Some very charismatic people don't have movie star looks at all.
That's so true. Many charismatic people are simply good at connecting with others emotionally. They know how to make people feel comfortable and understood.
And when people feel understood, they naturally want to continue the conversation.
Exactly. Think about the last time you talked to someone who made you feel truly listened to. You probably enjoyed that conversation much more than a normal one.
Definitely. In fact, listening might be one of the most powerful traits of charismatic people.
I think so too. When someone listens with real attention, it shows respect, and respect builds connection.
And connection is at the heart of charisma.
So today, in this episode, we're going to explore the different habits and behaviors that make people charismatic.
We'll talk about what charismatic people do differently in conversations and how anyone can start developing these skills.
By the end of this episode, you might realize that charisma isn't some magical quality after all.
It might simply be a set of small behaviors that create a big impression.
Exactly. And the good news is that these behaviors can be practiced.
And that means anyone, including our listeners, can become more charismatic in their everyday conversations.
So, Mike, earlier we talked about how charismatic people seem to attract attention naturally. I think a big part of that comes from the first impression they create.
Absolutely. First impressions are powerful. Sometimes people decide how they feel about someone within the first few seconds of meeting them.
It's amazing, isn't it? Before someone even says much, people are already forming opinions.
Yes, and charismatic people seem to understand this instinctively. When they enter a room, they appear relaxed, confident, and aware of the people around them.
That word you used is important, relaxed. Charismatic people rarely look tense or uncomfortable. They usually seem calm and present in the moment.
Right, and when someone appears comfortable, it makes others feel comfortable too.
Exactly. It's almost like their calm energy spreads to the people around them.
Another interesting thing is eye contact. Charismatic people tend to make natural eye contact when they speak with others.
Yes, but not in a strange or intense way, just enough to show that they are paying attention.
That's an important distinction. Too little eye contact can make someone seem nervous or uninterested, but too much can make people uncomfortable.
Charismatic people usually find that balance. They look at the person they're speaking with, they smile occasionally, and they show that they are engaged in the conversation.
And smiling plays a bigger role than many people realize.
Definitely. A genuine smile can instantly make someone seem more approachable.
Think about when you meet someone who greets you with a warm smile. You immediately feel more relaxed.
Exactly. That small gesture can completely change the tone of an interaction.
Body language is another important factor in first impressions.
Yes, charismatic people often have open and welcoming body language. Their posture is usually upright but relaxed.
They don't cross their arms tightly or look closed off.
Instead, they appear open and friendly, which invites others to talk to them.
Something else I've noticed is that charismatic people often greet others with genuine enthusiasm.
That's true. When they say hello, it feels sincere, not forced.
And sincerity is something people can usually sense very quickly.
That's right. People are surprisingly good at detecting when someone is being fake.
Which is why charisma isn't about pretending to be someone you're not.
Exactly. It's more about being fully present and showing genuine interest in the people around you.
That presence is what makes someone memorable.
I agree. Sometimes you meet someone for only a few minutes, but you remember them for a long time because of the positive energy they bring.
And that positive energy often starts with those first moments of interaction.
Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever met someone who seemed instantly charismatic the moment they walked into a room? What did they do that made such a strong impression? Tell us in the comments section.
That's a great question. When we start paying attention to those moments, we can learn a lot about human communication.
Exactly. Observing charismatic people can teach us many useful habits.
And the good news is that most of these habits are simple behaviors anyone can practice.
Right. Things like smiling, making eye contact, and greeting people warmly may sound small, but they have a huge impact.
In fact, sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference in how people perceive us.
That's very true. Charisma is rarely about dramatic actions. It's usually about subtle signals that make others feel comfortable.
And when people feel comfortable, conversations start to flow naturally.
Which is exactly what charismatic people are good at creating.
They create an atmosphere where people feel relaxed, welcome, and interested in talking.
And that's the beginning of genuine connection. And as we'll see in the next part of our conversation, one of the most powerful ways charismatic people build that connection is through listening. So, Mike, earlier we mentioned something that might surprise many people. One of the strongest traits of charismatic people is not how they speak, but how they listen.
That's absolutely true. Many people think charisma is about talking confidently or entertaining others, but in reality, great listeners often leave the strongest impression.
I completely agree. When someone listens carefully, you can feel it immediately. They're not just waiting for their turn to speak.
Exactly. They're actually paying attention to what you're saying.
And that kind of attention is rare today.
It really is. In many conversations, people are distracted. They might be thinking about what they will say next, checking their phone, or letting their mind wander.
But charismatic people usually do the opposite. They focus fully on the person speaking.
And that focus sends a powerful message. What you're saying matters.
That's such an important point. When someone feels that their thoughts and opinions matter, they naturally feel feel respected.
And respect creates connection.
Yes, and connection is really the heart of charisma.
Another interesting habit charismatic people have is asking thoughtful questions.
That's true. Instead of quickly changing the topic to themselves, they often ask follow-up questions.
For example, if someone says they recently started a new job, a charismatic listener might say, "What do you enjoy most about it so far?"
Exactly. That kind of question shows curiosity and interest.
And curiosity makes conversations deeper and more engaging.
I've noticed that when someone asks thoughtful questions, conversations often become much more interesting.
That's because questions encourage people to share more of their experiences and opinions.
And when people talk about their experiences, they often feel more connected to the person listening.
Another powerful listening skill is reacting naturally to what someone says.
Yes, simple responses like, "That's interesting," or "That must have been exciting," can show that you're truly engaged.
Even small reactions like nodding your head can signal that you are following the conversation.
Exactly. Those little signals make the speaker feel understood.
There's also something called active listening.
That's when someone occasionally summarizes or reflects what the other person said, right?
Exactly. For example, if someone tells you about a challenging project at work, you might say, "So it sounds like that project was really demanding."
That shows you were listening carefully and trying to understand their experience.
And when people feel understood, they feel comfortable continuing the conversation.
Which is why charismatic people often create conversations that feel easy and natural.
Yes, talking with them doesn't feel like work.
Instead, it feels enjoyable.
Another thing charismatic listeners avoid is interrupting.
That's a big one. Interrupting someone can quickly break the flow of a conversation.
And it can make the other person feel like their thoughts aren't important.
Exactly. Charismatic people usually allow others to finish their ideas before responding.
And that patience makes conversations smoother.
You know, Mike, sometimes people worry that if they listen too much, they might seem quiet or uninteresting.
That's a common concern. But interestingly, the opposite is often true.
Yes, people tend to remember those who listen to them with genuine attention.
Because everyone enjoys talking with someone who truly listens.
It makes the conversation feel meaningful.
And meaningful conversations are often the ones we remember most.
So, in many ways, listening might be one of the simplest and most powerful tools for becoming more charismatic.
Absolutely. It doesn't require special talent. It just requires attention and genuine interest in others.
And when people feel that interest, they naturally enjoy being around you.
Which is exactly what charisma is all about.
So far, we've talked about first impressions and the power of listening, but there's another quality that people often associate with charisma, and that is confidence.
Yes, confidence plays a big role. When someone speaks with confidence, people tend to trust them more.
That's true. Confident people usually sound clear and certain about what they're saying.
But here's the interesting part. Charismatic confidence is very different from arrogance.
That's a really important distinction. Confidence attracts people, but arrogance usually pushes them away.
Exactly. Arrogant people often try to dominate conversations. They talk mostly about themselves, and they rarely show interest in other people's ideas.
While confident people are comfortable sharing their thoughts, but they are also open to hearing different opinions.
Right. They don't feel the need to prove that they're always right.
And that attitude makes conversations feel much more balanced.
Another sign of healthy confidence is the way someone handles mistakes.
That's a good point. Truly confident people are usually comfortable admitting when they are wrong.
Yes, instead of becoming defensive, they might say something like, "That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way."
And that kind of response actually makes them seem more confident, not less.
Because it shows they're secure enough to learn and grow.
I also think confident people speak at a steady pace. They don't rush their words.
That's true. When someone speaks too quickly, it can sometimes signal nervousness.
But when someone speaks calmly and clearly, it gives the impression that they are comfortable and in control.
Another subtle sign of confidence is posture.
Yes, body language matters a lot. Standing or sitting upright can make someone appear more confident instantly.
And it also affects how the speaker feels internally.
That's right. Our body language can influence our emotions.
For example, if you stand with your shoulders relaxed and your head up, you often feel more confident naturally.
And when people feel confident, their voice usually sounds stronger and more natural.
Something else charismatic people do is avoid exaggerating their achievements.
That's true. They don't constantly try to impress others.
Instead, they often let their actions and ideas speak for themselves.
And interestingly, that quiet confidence often leaves a stronger impression.
Because people people respect authenticity.
Yes, authenticity is very attractive in conversation.
When someone is authentic, they don't pretend to know everything.
They simply share their thoughts honestly.
And honesty builds trust.
Trust is essential for charisma because people naturally gravitate towards those they trust.
Another sign of balanced confidence is giving credit to others.
That's a great point. Charismatic people often acknowledge the contributions of others.
Instead of saying, "I did everything," they might say, "Our team worked really hard on that project."
And that generosity makes them more likable.
Because people appreciate those who recognize their efforts.
So confidence doesn't mean being the loudest person in the room.
It simply means being comfortable with who you are and expressing your thoughts clearly.
And when that confidence is combined with humility and respect, it becomes very powerful.
Exactly. That combination is one of the secrets behind truly charismatic people.
Mike, there's another trait that many charismatic people seem to share, and that's their ability to tell engaging stories.
That's a great point. Storytelling is one of the most powerful communication skills a person can have.
I agree. When someone tells a story well, people naturally want to listen.
Exactly. Stories capture our attention in a way that simple facts often cannot.
For example, imagine someone saying, "I had a difficult day at work." That's informative, but it's not very engaging.
But if they say, "You won't believe what happened to me at work today," people immediately become curious.
Right. Curiosity pulls people into the conversation.
Charismatic people often understand this instinctively. Instead of just sharing information, they share experiences.
And experiences usually come with emotions, details, and small moments that make the story interesting.
Another reason stories are powerful is that they help people visualize what happened.
That's true. When someone describes a situation clearly, listeners can imagine the scene in their minds.
For example, instead of saying, "The meeting was stressful," a storyteller might say, "Everyone in the room was silent and you could feel the tension."
That description helps the listener feel the moment.
Exactly. And when people feel something during a story, they become more engaged.
I've also noticed that charismatic storytellers often include small details.
Yes, details bring stories to life.
For instance, mentioning where something happened, what people said, or how someone reacted can make the story more vivid.
But interestingly, charismatic storytellers also keep their stories focused.
That's important. If a story has too many unnecessary details, people can lose interest.
Exactly. A good storyteller knows which details are important and which ones to leave out.
Another thing charismatic people often do is change their tone of voice while telling a story.
That's a great observation. Variation in tone keeps the listener interested.
If someone speaks in exactly the same tone the entire time, the story might feel a little flat.
But when someone slightly changes their tone or pace, it creates energy in the conversation.
I also think facial expressions play a role in storytelling.
Definitely. Expressions help communicate emotions.
For example, a smile, a surprised look, or even raised eyebrows can make a story more expressive.
And when listeners can see those emotions, they feel more connected to the story.
Another important element of storytelling is relatability.
Yes, stories become powerful when listeners can relate to them.
For example, a story about a small mistake at work or an awkward moment in public is something many people understand.
Exactly. When people recognize themselves in the story, they feel a stronger connection with the speaker.
And that connection is one of the reasons storytelling strengthens charisma.
Because stories turn ordinary conversations into memorable moments.
That's very true. People may forget the exact words someone said, but they often remember the story.
And the emotions that came with it.
Which is why storytelling is such a valuable skill in everyday communication.
From casual conversations with friends to presentations at work, stories can make ideas more engaging.
And charismatic people seem to use this skill naturally.
But just like other communication skills, storytelling can also be practiced and improved over time.
Mike, something else I've noticed about charismatic people is the kind of energy they bring into a conversation.
That's a great observation. Charismatic people often have a positive energy that affects the mood of everyone around them.
Exactly. When they enter a room, the atmosphere somehow feels lighter and more welcoming.
And what's interesting is that this energy doesn't always mean being extremely excited or loud.
That's true. Some charismatic people are actually quite calm, but their presence still feels positive.
I think the key word here is emotional influence.
What do you mean by that?
Well, emotions can spread from one person to another. If someone is enthusiastic, relaxed, and positive, other people often begin to feel the same way.
That's very true. It's almost like emotions are contagious.
Exactly. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional contagion.
That makes sense. If you spend time with someone who is constantly negative, you might start feeling a little negative yourself.
And the opposite is also true. Spending time with someone positive can improve your mood.
Charismatic people seem to understand this effect, even if they don't think about it consciously.
Yes, they often bring encouragement, humor, and optimism into conversations.
Humor is a great example. A simple joke or light comment can completely change the tone of a conversation.
Absolutely. When people laugh together, they feel more relaxed and connected.
But charismatic humor is usually friendly and inclusive.
That's an important point. They rarely make jokes that embarrass or exclude others.
Instead, their humor helps everyone feel comfortable.
Another sign of positive energy is encouragement.
Yes, charismatic people often encourage others by recognizing their ideas or achievements.
For example, they might say something like, "That's a really interesting idea," or "You did a great job with that project."
And those small comments can mean a lot to people.
Because everyone appreciates recognition.
Exactly. When someone acknowledges your effort, it can boost your confidence.
Charismatic people also tend to focus on possibilities rather than problems.
That's a great point. Instead of saying, "This will never work," they might say, "Let's see if we can find a solution."
That kind of attitude encourages creativity and teamwork.
And it makes conversations feel more productive and hopeful.
Another subtle habit is how charismatic people react when others share good news.
Yes, they often show genuine excitement. If someone says they achieved something important, a charismatic person might respond with enthusiasm. They might say, "That's fantastic. You must feel really proud."
And that reaction makes the other person feel valued and supported.
Which strengthens the relationship.
Exactly. Positive energy helps build stronger connections between people.
I also think charismatic people are good at staying calm during difficult moments.
That's very true. When situations become stressful, their calm attitude can help others stay calm as well.
It's like they become a stabilizing presence in the room.
And that quality can be very reassuring to others.
So, charisma isn't just about attracting attention.
It's also about influencing the emotional atmosphere around you.
And when someone consistently brings positive energy into conversations, people naturally enjoy being around them.
Which is one of the reasons charismatic people often become the center of strong social connections.
So, Mike, after everything we've discussed so far, there's an important question many people might be wondering about.
Let me guess. The question is, can charisma actually be learned?
Exactly. Some people believe charisma is something you are simply born with.
Yes, many people imagine charisma as a natural gift that only a few people have.
But when we look closely at the habits of charismatic people, something interesting appears.
Most of their behaviors are actually learnable skills.
That's right. Skills like listening carefully, maintaining eye contact, telling engaging stories, and speaking with calm confidence.
None of those things are magical talents.
They're communication habits that people can practice over time.
For example, someone who wants to become more charismatic can start by paying more attention during conversations.
Instead of thinking about what to say next, they can focus fully on the person speaking.
That simple change alone can make a difference.
Another habit people can practice is asking better questions.
Yes, thoughtful questions show curiosity and genuine interest.
For instance, instead of asking simple yes or no questions, someone could ask open-ended ones.
Like asking, "What did you enjoy most about that experience?"
Exactly. Open-ended questions encourage people to share more.
And when conversations become deeper, they often become more interesting as well.
Confidence can also be developed with practice.
That's true. Many confident speakers were once very nervous.
But with experience, they learned how to express their thoughts more clearly.
Even small habits can help build confidence.
For example, speaking a little slower, maintaining good posture, and making eye contact.
These simple adjustments can make someone appear more confident almost immediately.
Storytelling is another skill people can improve.
Yes, people can practice describing experiences in a more vivid and engaging way.
Instead of just giving facts, they can include small details and emotions.
Over time, this makes conversations more interesting and memorable.
Another useful habit is developing positive energy in conversations.
Right, that might mean offering encouragement, showing appreciation, or simply smiling more often.
And these actions don't require extraordinary talent.
They just require awareness and intention.
One interesting thing about charisma is that small changes often produce big results.
That's very true. Sometimes a slight improvement in listening or body language can completely change how people perceive you.
And the best part is that these improvements can happen gradually.
No one needs to transform their personality overnight.
Instead, they can slowly build better communication habits.
Over time, those habits become natural.
And when communication feels natural and confident, people often appear more charismatic.
Which means charisma is not a mysterious gift after all.
It's more like a collection of skills that anyone can develop with practice.
And the more someone practices these habits, the more natural and authentic their charisma becomes.
Mike, throughout this episode, we've talked about many different traits of charismatic people. But I think it's important to remember that charisma often comes from small, everyday behaviors.
I completely agree. Many people imagine charisma as something dramatic or extraordinary, but in reality, it's often built from simple habits.
Exactly. Small actions repeated consistently can create a strong impression over time.
For example, greeting people warmly when you see them.
Yes, that simple moment of saying hello with a smile can instantly make someone feel welcome.
Another small habit is remembering details about people.
That's a great one. If someone mentioned something important in a previous conversation, remembering it later shows that you truly listened.
For example, asking someone, "How did your presentation go yesterday?" can make them feel valued.
Because it shows that their experiences matter to you.
Another powerful habit is expressing appreciation.
Yes, sometimes people forget how meaningful a simple thank you can be.
When someone recognizes your effort, it feels encouraging.
And charismatic people often make appreciation part of their everyday communication.
They notice the efforts of others and acknowledge them openly.
Another small behavior that makes a big difference is giving people your full attention.
That's very true. In today's world, attention is actually quite rare.
Many conversations are interrupted by phones, notifications, or distractions.
But when someone focuses completely on the conversation, it sends a strong message of respect.
It shows that the person in front of you is important in that moment.
Another habit charismatic people have is speaking kindly about others.
That's an interesting point.
When someone consistently speaks positively about others, people begin to trust them more.
Because it shows generosity of character.
Exactly. People feel safer around someone who avoids unnecessary criticism.
And kindness often creates a very positive reputation.
Another small but powerful habit is showing enthusiasm for ideas.
Yes, even a simple phrase like, "That's an interesting idea," can encourage someone to share more.
Encouragement often inspires creativity in conversations.
And it makes discussions feel collaborative rather than competitive.
One more behavior that charismatic people often practice is patience.
That's true. They don't rush conversations or interrupt others.
Instead, they allow conversations to develop naturally.
And that patience makes people feel comfortable expressing their thoughts.
Over time, these small habits combine to create a powerful impression.
Someone may not even realize exactly why they enjoy talking with a charismatic person.
They simply know that conversations with that person feel enjoyable and meaningful.
And that feeling is what people remember.
Which brings us back to the main idea of today's episode.
Charisma isn't about trying to impress everyone.
It's about creating positive and meaningful interactions with the people around you.
Through simple habits like listening, encouraging, smiling, and showing genuine interest.
When those habits become part of your everyday communication, people naturally feel drawn to you.
And that's the real secret behind charismatic people. Small behaviors practiced consistently that make others feel valued and understood.